Today I'm going to share with you what I've learned doing business in China, and I hope you can get some good ideas of my talk. But first of all, who am I? I'm an entrepreneur. I've created 5 companies, all of them in gaming. I have 2 exits. And one of the things I did was a game console called Zibo in 2008. We created this console from scratch, hardware, software, firmware, everything, and we got investment from Qualcomm. And we launched it in emerging countries. Basically, it was a 3G console, right, like the Wii, which was announced later, 5 years later. We downloaded games over the air, and we provided a way to monetize games in emerging countries. So we launched this in Brazil, in Mexico, and in 2009, I went to China. I arrived in Shanghai with no one that I knew in the city, and my mission was, as a founder, to crack the Chinese market. So what did I do? How did I start it? I will tell you in a few minutes. Basically, what I've done, just to continue here, is we made partnerships with China Digital TV and China Unicom, which was the second largest carrier. It still is in China. And we promoted the Zibo in China. Instead of a console, we created a module that goes into a set-top boxes in China at that time. So it was very, very hard, and here I will share with you what I've learned. But before that, currently, I'm an investment partner in Game Founders. We are a gaming accelerator. We have presence in Asia, in Europe, in the US starting next year, and we also expand in China. So I'm back dealing with China in my current role as well. Okay, so what did I learn? China in a nutshell. These are some of the things I've learned about China. First of all, which is kind of obvious, China is entirely, I would say, controlled by the Communist Party. Why does that matter to you? Because most of the decisions made in China are made by the Communist Party, and that influences all the decisions made by entrepreneurs that are in China and outside China. How? First of all, there are a lot of regulations that you need to pay attention to. If you're a gaming company, you need to follow the regulations. You need to be approved by the government. The content needs to be approved, and etc. They are always issuing new rules. For instance, in July of this year, they released new rules about games in the app stores that need to be approved by the ministry, and that's very complex. Second thing is, most cases, they tend to favor local companies. In most cases, local companies understand better the market. So there is, I think, one advantage for companies that are coming from abroad. And also, it's always helpful to speak Mandarin if you want to deal with China and Chinese government officials as well. Second thing I've learned is China is very different from the West. It seems obvious, but if you haven't been to China, it's not obvious. It's only obvious when you are there for some time. For instance, a simple example, most Visa cards and MasterCards that we use in most of the world, they don't work in many places in China, so you need to use UnionPay. WeChat is the de facto business and communication tool for people. For instance, these weeks I'm setting a lot of meetings in China. It's all done by WeChat, no email at all. So most business people in China, they use WeChat. Most people pay with Alipay. You see a lot of people going to cafes or to restaurants. They just show their phones. Someone scans their phone and they pay it using Alipay. So it's becoming a much faster cashless society than we are used to believe. And in terms of gaming and apps, there are more than 400 app stores for Android in China. It's really, really competitive, and everyone has an installed base of probably some millions of users because the country is so big and the population is so big, right? So, I've learned that. It seems obvious in hindsight, but China is a different system. So when you go there, you need to reset your mind and make sure that you are going to tackle a completely different reality from what we have in many other countries in the world, except in China. Another thing that's important is the competition, right? I chose this picture here to illustrate. It's like someone said to me, if there are 1 in a million people in the world are Einstein, in China you have 1,400 Einsteins, right? 1,400 people that are like Einstein. So the competition is huge because all the people are hungry to win, and they want to really win. So whatever you do, there will be always people doing a lot more and with a lot of effort, a lot of hustle. So one thing that I've learned here is, just another one. One thing that I've learned here in China is, when you go there, when you do business in China, learn to unlearn. Why? Because the logic of China, you know, I always compare, let's say, to Mr. Spock, trying to understand the humans, right? We don't understand it. It's completely different. Some things do not make sense. For instance, I've seen many companies doing, let's say, hardware, software, consultancy, investment. They have real estate and etc. This does not make any sense for us in most of the West. But in China, it's different. It works. And these companies are huge, and they have a lot of money, and the country is growing a lot, as you can infer, for the latest developments coming from China. So, I mean, try to reset your logic, try to understand China in a different way, and try to unlearn the things that you've learned. That's the only way to tackle China. Another thing that I've learned that's really important is that you are going to be copied, no matter what. You know, these are some examples here I got on the web. Some clones from Starbucks. So if you're a store, you are going to be copied. You have a Starbucks. You have a lot of other clones everywhere in China. You have Apple stores that are fake. So, I mean, Chinese are very, very entrepreneurial, and they're really fast to make things happen. So you are going to be copied no matter what. So here are some photos of the Apple Watch that was cloned like 1 month after Apple launched the Apple Watch. So you can buy them. Hardware looks very similar. Of course, the software does not look as good. And also games, right? So this is a clone of Pokemon Go that was launched the one or 2 months after the success of Pokemon Go earlier this year. So one thing I tell people is prepare yourself. I mean, if you have a good thing, you will have a copy in China. No matter if it's software, no matter if it's hardware or store, you will have a copy in a few weeks or in a few months. It's amazing how fast the Chinese are to learn and to execute. And of course, that leads to a lot of disappointment, because most people think, oh, I have such a great game, or such a great app, or such a great business, and I'm launching it here, it will be huge, etc. And they will see that in a few weeks or a few months, it will be copied like by many people, not just one, by many people. So one example here was that I always tell people to understand what China is. It's Uber. Uber was founded in 2010. They created this model of car sharing that's very popular now in the world, which they are the clear winner. And Didi, which is the Uber competitor in China, was launched, if I'm not mistaken, in 2013, so 3 years after Uber. And what happened last month, that probably you guys know, Uber is out of China. They were acquired by their competitor that was launched 3 years later. Why that happened? Well, there are many reasons. First, I would say, I mean, my personal opinion is that probably there was some government regulation interference in the business of Uber in China. Second thing, Uber was not able to adapt to the tastes of the Chinese people. And third thing, Didi executed really, really fast and ended up acquiring the operations of Uber in China. So Uber was considered by many analysts as the most Chinese Western company in China. And even then, even Uber, they failed in China, right? Last week I was in Shanghai, and actually the app stopped working at all. You cannot use it anymore for a Western. You need to create an account now that is owned by Didi in China with the Chinese payment methods. So my message to you is very simple. Try to not have a lot of expectations. I know that China is huge, the market is huge, there are a lot of opportunities there, but at some point in time, either you will do the right things or partner with someone that knows the local market, or you will be kicked out of the market at some point in time. So with that said, how to win then? So what I'm saying is basically China is very complex and very difficult for Western companies to tackle. Yeah, it's true, but there are some ways to win. One of them that I always advise companies to do, before going to China, make sure you are a successful and strong company financially and culturally outside China. I see a lot of developers trying to go to China when they do not have a lot of success, thinking that by by a way of the destiny, they will make it big in China without making it big in the West. I think that's not true in most cases. What I've seen is you need to be very strong, have a very strong roots and a lot of financial background to go to China and to try your luck out there. So again, that's my own advice because I've seen many companies failing in China. The second thing is adapt for the Chinese market. It's like a new planet, right? It's like you are arriving in Mars. That's in a good way, because I think they have a lot to teach us. We have a lot to learn from them, what they're doing. But it's a new planet. So one example I give in the games industry, I don't know if you know this. This is a Nintendo console just for the Chinese market. This was actually the Nintendo 64 in the form of a controller. And you could buy the cartridges in kiosks, in retailers. So Nintendo, which is Nintendo, I mean, have you seen Nintendo changing for any other region in the world? I haven't. Nintendo has done this, and that was very successful at the time. It was called the iQi, which was a console which was a controller with a console built in, and where you can buy the games offline. This was in the time where piracy was actually very widespread in China. So you could buy the games at kiosks everywhere. So adapt, do whatever you need to do, but do it differently. When I launched my console in China, consoles were forbidden, strictly forbidden in China. So what we did was to create a module to put inside a set-top box and make it an entertainment and education device instead of a gaming console. It worked for some time. So I always advise people to adapt, do things completely different. I mean, if you think you are going crazy with the strategy in China, it's because you are doing it the right way, because it's completely different from the logic that we have in the West. This picture here is funny because I always say that the window of opportunity in China is very, very small. So basically what I'm saying is, if you don't have a product or a version of your software or a strategy in 1 or 2, 3 months, it's gone. It's done and it's gone. So your product will be copied. A lot of people will try to compete and will outsmart you. And in 3 months, you are out of the market. So China is all about speed. You need to be fast. You need to iterate very, very fast. And you need to do that in a way that you are constantly changing your mindset, constantly changing your product. The worst thing that can happen, actually, which I see a lot of foreigners doing right now, is try to, in a way, patronize people in China. So China, 20 years ago, they were learning from the West. Even 10 years ago, around when I moved to China 7 years ago, they were still learning a lot from the West. But right now, they are on their own. They are teaching the West in ways that I thought they were not possible before. So, I mean, when you go there, don't try to say, oh, this is the right way, I'm doing this, and etc., because they will look at you and think you are basically an asshole. And I think that won't work anymore. So try to learn from them, because right now they have as much to teach us as we have to them. And the balance is changing. Actually, in a few years, I think we will have more to learn from China than they from us in the West. So try to be nice, try to understand their culture, why the ways are the way they are. I mean, this is a country which was in the top of the world for 5,000 years, and in the last 200 years they lost their edge, and now they're coming back to where they were in the past. So, I mean, they know how it is to be on the top of the world for the existence of the civilized world. So they understand that. So don't try to patronize and say, oh, let me teach you how things work, how to manage, etc. They know that very well. And they are now teaching us how we do it. Also, one thing that I think was interesting, this is an observation of mine based on anecdotal evidence. I think the companies that do well in China are the companies focused on branding, on status. So one example is Apple. Apple does very well in China, as you know. I think 1/5 of the revenues come from China right now, and it's growing more and more over the years. And one of the reasons I think Apple was not kicked out, or they did not find a loophole in the regulation to damage Apple, because Apple means status. Apple is a very, very strong brand. So, in my opinion, Apple in China is seen as a Louis Vuitton, is seen as a Prada, is seen as a Rolex. It's not seen as a computer or phone brand, just that. If that was the case, I don't think Apple would last much in China. But I think they were very well to be really smart to how they treat the Chinese market with a lot of priority. And they're doing things like this. This is the store in Lujiazui area in Shanghai. I mean, this is an amazing store, much more impressive than in my opinion, than the New York one. And it's pretty cool. And they are doing that all over China. They are treating the market with respect, and they created a brand. So whatever you do, if you want to tackle China, in my opinion, it's better to go that way on something that's fancy, something that has status attached to it, that has value, than trying just to have a functional or utility product. And in the end, it's very simple. To win in China, you need to have a strong local partner. This strong local partner will be responsible for dealing with government, will be responsible for dealing with bureaucracy, and they might be also one possible acquirer to your company. Like in this case of Supercell, they were acquired by Tencent. Supercell was doing really well in China. They were bought by Tencent a few months ago, and now I'm sure they will do even better because they will use the Tencent distribution channels to do well. So in a nutshell, China has changed a lot in the last 5 years. You know, since I've lived there, I mean, the country has gone through an immense transformation. They went from copiers to trendsetters. They went from basing their business models on Western business models to creating their own. They are innovating like crazy. One example that I give to a lot of people are the drones from DJI. Yeah, I don't know if you know the company, these drones that we buy, they're most popular ones. They are designed and made in China. And they are the leaders in the drone space. This is the best company that has the best product and has the best software and actually the best branding. They are now copying Apple in a way. They are open stores in China. You see a lot of DJI stores in very, very fancy places. And they are building a brand for a drone company. So Xiaomi is doing the same. And I think we are witnessing the first wave of really global Chinese companies that are going to the world that do not rely on government for financial support or for protecting them in the Chinese market anymore. So the next 10 years, I expect to see a lot of these Chinese companies going to the West and winning in the West as well. One example is Leeco. Leeco is now hiring like 12,000 people in Silicon Valley in California, and they are launching from cars to a competitor of Netflix to phones and TVs in America and in Europe. So in a nutshell, try to treat China with a lot of respect. They deserve it. They earn it. And I think you'll be surprised how nice people are and how straightforward they are in doing business with you. Sometimes, because of cultural differences, they will bargain a lot, negotiate a lot. That's normal. I mean, I've seen negotiations falling like 3, 5, 10 times and then going back. But that's cultural. We need to understand that. And they are really, I mean, in my opinion, really nice people, really smart people. And in this century, they will win in a way or another. So if you want to get big in China, I mean, my best advice is find a reliable and trustworthy partner that can help you doing the marketing and also the legal approvals in the government in China. Okay, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Reinaldo. Any questions, guys?
Can I ask how complicated it is to learn Mandarin, and how many years do you think it will take?
Okay, the question is how complicated it is to learn Mandarin. First of all, if you want to crack China and live there, it's very important to learn Mandarin. It's very complicated. I would say it's a full-time job. So, I mean, I speak many languages, and I have a very hard time to learn Mandarin because it's a different paradigm, right, from learning other languages. I mean, forget about writing in Mandarin. Only if you're really dedicated full-time for some years, you'll learn to write. Reading is possible, and speaking is very complicated, the intonation, but Yeah, you can learn it. I would say in 2 years, if you work hard, 3 years, you can learn Mandarin. I can speak a bit, but I'm not fluent in Mandarin by any means.
All right, anyone else? Actually, I have a question.
Yep.
What was the fate of Zibo in China?
So, yeah, the Zibo was an interesting story. Zibo actually was killed by Android phones. So when I launched Zibo in 2008, there was no Android yet. Actually, Apple Store didn't exist. So we were using Brew technology from Qualcomm. And what we didn't see was, our developers were making games for us in emerging countries where they were making money, but then Android started and the user base became huge. So 100 million headsets, let's say, in 2010. And then all the developers went to develop for Android. And we were not fast enough to change the operating system to Android in time. So basically we died, like in 2012.
It was a bad timing to launch a console.
It was actually a very good timing, but the timing for Android was even better. And we never expected the threat of mobile phones to destroy our business, which we were seen as a PlayStation or Xbox or Wii, threat. We didn't see the mobile phones as a threat in gaming. So, yeah.
All right. So thanks, Reinaldo, for a very insightful talk.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.